The grand ballroom of New York's most exclusive charity gala was bathed in golden light. Chandeliers sparkled, reflecting the shimmering gowns of the city's elite. Waiters in crisp black uniforms weaved between elegantly dressed guests, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. At the center of the spectacle stood Ivanka Trump, effortlessly poised in an ivory silk gown. She greeted dignitaries, CEOs, and philanthropists, her signature grace making each guest feel like the most important person in the room. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget, tomorrow we have another powerful story for you. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. As the evening progressed, the crowd's anticipation built for the night's highlight, Ivanka's speech on children's education initiatives. She stepped onto the stage, adjusting the microphone, her usual composed confidence radiating through the room. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a sudden voice cut through the elegant murmur of the guests. "Excuse me, Ms. Trump, do you really think you deserve to be up there?" The air in the ballroom froze. All eyes turned to the source of the interruption. A young journalist, standing near the back, dressed more casually than the evening's formal dress code demanded. His expression was sharp, his voice carrying a challenging, almost mocking tone. Ivanka blinked, momentarily caught off guard. The murmurs in the crowd intensified. Some guests exchanged uneasy glances. Others waited in tense silence, eager to see how she would respond. Then the journalist continued, his voice laced with arrogance. "You were born into wealth and privilege. What do you really know about struggling families?" A few gasps rippled through the audience. Some guests shook their heads in disapproval. Others sipped their drinks, fascinated by the unexpected tension. Ivanka let the moment stretch, scanning the room. She wasn't just reacting, she was calculating. Then, with the slightest hint of a smile, she finally spoke. "Interesting question, but I have a better one." She tilted her head slightly, eyes locked on the journalist. "Do you believe that where you come from should define where you end up?" Saktarin Fifiu. Ballroom, once buzzing, now held pure electric silence. The journalist shifted slightly, clearly not expecting Ivanka to flip the question back at him. He hesitated before responding, but the room had already turned in her favor. Ivanka stepped forward, her voice calm yet commanding. "I was born into privilege, yes, but let me ask you something. Does that mean I should apologize for my opportunities? Or should I use them to create more opportunities for others?" The journalist opened his mouth, but Ivanka didn't pause. "I've met families who struggle every single day. I've walked through shelters, spoken to single mothers working 2 jobs to give their kids a future. And I've used my position to fund programs that help them. So tell me," she continued, her eyes locked on the journalist, "how does dismissing my work help those families?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others leaned in, captivated. The journalist swallowed, his earlier smugness fading. I just meant—" "You meant?" Ivanka interrupted smoothly, "that it's easier to judge someone from a distance than to actually see what they do up close." The audience erupted into applause, the shift in power undeniable. Ivanka smiled, but there was no arrogance, just certainty. "We don't choose the circumstances we're born into," she concluded, "but we do choose what we do with them." The journalist had no response, and as Ivanka finally turned back to her speech, the room no longer questioned whether she deserved to be up there. She had just proved it. The weight of Ivanka's words hung in the air. The journalist, clearly not expecting to be challenged so directly, hesitated. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "Well, I suppose that depends," he said, forcing confidence back into his tone. "But let's be honest. Most people don't get the opportunities you've had." Ivanka nodded slowly, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. Her gaze never wavered from him. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "Not everyone starts in the same place. But the real question is, what do we do with the opportunities we have? Do we use them to build, to uplift, to create something greater than ourselves? Or do we spend our time tearing others down because their path was different from ours?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Some nodded in quiet agreement. Others leaned in, captivated by the exchange. The journalist shifted on his feet. "But don't you think—" Ivanka raised a hand slightly, not rudely, but with quiet authority. "You assumed I can't understand struggle because I was born into privilege. But let me ask you, how many struggling families have you sat with? How many single mothers trying to put food on the table have you listened to? How many young entrepreneurs fighting for a chance have you mentored?" Silence. The journalist's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Ivanka took another step forward. "Because I have. I've spent years traveling, listening, working, alongside people who are making change happen. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. That's what leadership is." The weight of her words settled over the room. Even those who had been skeptical now found themselves reconsidering. The tension had shifted. The journalist, once so sure of himself, now seemed uncertain. Ivanka's voice softened just slightly. "So, let me ask again. Do you believe that where you come from should define where you end up?" A slow, steady applause began to build, spreading across the room like a rising tide. The journalist looked around, realizing he had lost control of the moment. He exhaled sharply, lowering his gaze. Ivanka let the silence linger before offering him the smallest, knowing smile. "I think we both know the answer." The applause grew louder. She had not just answered his question. She had turned it into something greater. A challenge, a lesson, a moment of reflection for everyone in the room. And for the first time that evening, the journalist had nothing left to say. As applause filled the room, the journalist shifted uncomfortably, gripping his microphone as if searching for a way to regain control. But the energy had shifted. Then, a voice cut through the silence. "I'd like to say something." All heads turned to a man in the center, a self-made entrepreneur, his presence commanding. He stood, buttoning his navy blazer. "I came from nothing. No guarantees, no safety nets." He glanced at the journalist. "Yet, I worked, sacrificed, and built my own way." The room held its breath. He gestured toward Ivanka. "And you know what? The first person who ever gave me a real chance, who listened to me, was her." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. "You talk about privilege like it's a crime," the man continued. "But what's worse? Having advantages and using them to help others? Or standing on the sidelines, criticizing while doing nothing?" The journalist swallowed hard. Ivanka, calm but firm, spoke. "Privilege isn't the problem. It's what you do with it that matters." A woman near the front nodded. "And from what I've seen, Ivanka has done more with hers than most." More murmurs of agreement. The journalist, once smug, now seemed exposed, searching for words. But there were none left. Ivanka let the silence linger before delivering the final blow. "You came here expecting an easy target," she said smoothly. "But this isn't about me. It's about how we choose to see the world. You can tear others down, or you can build something greater than yourself. The man in the blazer nodded. And that's the difference between critics and leaders. For the first time, the journalist lowered his microphone. The ballroom erupted into applause. Ivanka hadn't just answered his challenge. She had turned it into a defining moment. As applause thundered through the ballroom, the journalist took a slow step back, his confidence visibly shaken. He had come expecting to expose weakness, but had instead witnessed a master class in grace and resilience. Ivanka let the applause settle before speaking again, her voice unwavering. "It's easy to judge from the outside," she said, scanning the room. "But are you spending more time tearing others down or building something yourself?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. The journalist, still holding his microphone, lowered his gaze. Ivanka continued, her tone calm yet firm. "True strength isn't measured by struggle alone. It's what you do with what you've been given. You can criticize, or you can contribute." She offered him a small, knowing smile. "I hope one day, instead of questioning others, you choose to make a difference yourself." A final wave of applause erupted, louder, more genuine. As Ivanka stepped away from the podium, the philanthropist in the navy blazer approached her with a nod. "Well handled," she exhaled, a soft but victorious smile touching her lips. That was the point. Meanwhile, the journalist sank into his seat, staring down at his notepad. The weight of the moment undeniable. Not just for him, but for everyone in the room. Don't forget, tomorrow we have another powerful story for you. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it.